Daf Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, 5 lines from the top at the 2 dots. Ton Rabbanon Piskei Sharei Gina. If you have doors that enter into a garden, so you have the door that enters between the garden, the Gina, which is a Carmelis, which has a din of a Carmelis, which is Yesrim Betzisayim Shlehu Kafladira, and it opens into a Rishus HaRabim. Bisman sheyesh lehem beishar mibifneim, when there's a gatehouse on the inside. The gatehouse has a din of a rishus hayochid. So when it has a gatehouse on the inside, peisech v'noel mibifneim, you can unlock and lock from the inside. Mibachutz peisech v'noel mibachutz. If it has a gatehouse on the outside, you can lock and unlock from the outside. Mikan umikan. If there's a gatehouse on both sides, peisech v'noel kan v'kan. If there's no gatehouse either on the inside or the outside, asurim kan v'kan, it's also in both cases. So if we have the following scenario, you have over here the wall, and you have a lock. The lock itself, we're talking where it has the dimensions of a Rishus HaYochid. So it has Daled al Daled, and it's 10 high. So the lock itself is a Rishus HaYochid. If you put the key in the lock, then you're putting it into a Rishus HaYochid. You're doing Hanocha in the Rishus HaYochid. So if you are in a Rishus HaRabim, if the key is down in the street, you can't pick it up and put it into the lock, because you'll be now carrying from the Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYochid. If it is in the inside, and then you're in the Gina, you have the same scenario where it is a Carmelis to Rishus HaYochid. So the only way you can do it is if you have a gatehouse. The gatehouse is itself considered to be Rishus HaYochid, and then if it's surrounded by a gatehouse, then you have, like the case of the Mishnah, where you have a wall surrounding, it's in the gatehouse, and then everything is within the Rishus HaYochid. It's all considered to be a Rishus HaYochid, so therefore you don't have this issue. Now, according to Rameir, then it's not only if the key is on the Rishus HaRabim that you can't pick it up and put it into the lock, because that's taking from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYochid, which everyone will agree, of course, that it's also. But according to Rameir, even if the key was put on top of the lock, which is a Rishus HaYochid, and then if you take the key from here and lock it into the door, it's all in the Rishus HaYochid, it still would be also, because we're afraid that you would now maybe bring it down to where you are and bring it to the Rishus HaRabim. We'd be geyser. Even if you put it here and this is all a Rishus HaYochid, we'd still be geyser. And initially, we hold in Rameir. We'll see that there's going to be retraction of that, but initially we're holding Rameir. Even if this is a Carmelis on the side, which is a Carmelis, you'd also have that problem, because we're afraid you might take the key to the Carmelis. But if it's in the gatehouse, it's all within the Rishus HaYochid, so everything is Rishus HaYochid, so you don't have that issue. Now, the question is, why is this considered a Rishus HaYochid? So it's Daled al Daled, it's 10 high. How is this considered Rishus HaYochid? So we must say that with Asik, we view the Mechitzas as coming down. But we have an issue that it's a Mechitzah Shegedim Boikim Boy. So therefore, that would nullify the Mechitzah. So why is it considered Rishus HaYochid? So Taisus has one teretz to say that we're talking about there's a threshold that is 3 high, and therefore it's not a Mechitzah Shegedim Boikim Boy, because this is an obstruction. Taisus Arush is talking where the lock extends all the way down to the floor. The Ritva says that we're talking a scenario where the lock qualifies itself to be a tikra, that it has the characteristics of Pitikra Yared V'Seisim, and when we say Pitikra Yared V'Seisim, there we don't have the issue of mechitz shegadin breaking by. Al kol panim, this lock is a rishus hayachid, and therefore you can't, according to Rameir, you can't even have the key on top of the lock because we're afraid that you might bring it to where you're standing into the different rishos. Then continuing, if you have stores that open into Rishus Rabim Bisman Shemanu Lamata Masora, when the lock of the door is below 10 Tvachim. So therefore, since it's not 10 Tvachim, in this case over here, the lock is a carmelis. It's not a Rishus Yochid. Maybe Mafteach Merev Shabbos, you can take the key, Erev Shabbos, Omenich Bas Kupa, and leave it on the threshold. Because the threshold is also a carmelis, so it's all within a carmelis. The next day, you can take the key and unlock the door, and put it back on the threshold. But when the lock is above 10, so it's above 10, it's a Rishus HaYochid, and therefore you can't take from the Rishus HaYochid to the threshold, which is a carmelis, so you do the following. Maybe Mafteach Merev Shabbos, you bring the key Erev Shabbos, and you leave it on top of the lock, which is a Rishus HaYochid. The next day, you can unlock the door, and then put it back on top. This is what Rameir says. Now, this is what we alluded to before, that over here, you see over here that Rameir has changed the shita. He was chayzer. Even though previously he said that by a carmelis, it's the gzeira, that he's geyser, that if you're in one rishus, if you're in the rishus yochid, you can't lock in rishus haram and vice versa. You were also geyser if it's in a carmelis. Over here we see that he's not geyser. That he says over here that if the lock is above 10, which is a rishus yochid, you can put the key on top of the lock, even though you're standing on the threshold, which is a carmelis. So you see that here that he is chayzer. That where is he geyser? That you might bring the key to you and come to carry. That's where, for instance, here in the rishus yochid, the key is in the rishus harabim, or vice versa. But in a carmelis, you wouldn't be geyser. So this is what Rameir says. The Chacham say, even if the key is higher than 10, maybe Mafteach Merev Shabbos, you can bring the key on Erev Shabbos, and leave it on the threshold. And the next day you can lock and unlock, and bring it to its place. So apparently this is very difficult. How could you say that? He's taking from a carmelis to Rishus HaYochid. So we'll see shortly that the Chachamim consider this case over here, they consider the lock to be a mokum patur. And we'll see therefore what the machlokes is between Rameir and the Chachamim, whether it's a mokum patur or not. So he puts it on the lock, and he can lock and unlock, and then put it back in its place on the threshold. Or you put it on a windowsill that's on top of the doorway. So provided the windowsill is less than 4 tvachim, is less than dollar, it's a malkim patur, so you can put it on the windowsill. But if the windowsill is dollar 4x4, which it is not a malkim patur, which is a rishus hayochid, then it's also to do it, because you cannot transfer from the rishus, because that would be taking from one rishus to the other, would be taken from the carmelis to the rishus hayochid. Now the Gemara analyzes. Since it says with similarity with the chanuya is we must be dealing with a carmelis with a threshold which is a carmelis. So since it says that we're talking about the stores and we're comparing the case to the stores with the garden, it must be talking that the skupa is a carmelis. So hai manul hechidomi. Because it must be that it's a carmelis, because the garden is a carmelis, and we're comparing it. So therefore, haimano, the lock, if it's not arba malkum patur, it's a malkum patur, and why would Rameir say it's also to take it from the threshold? It should be mutter. The isbe arba, and if it has arba, the whole lemer rabbanon, Af Bisman Shamon Malam Yud, maybe Mafteach, Merav Shabbos and Manicha Biaskupa. If that's the case, how can the Rabbanan say in such a case you take the key and put it on the threshold and the next day you can lock and unlock it and lock it by Seich V'Noil by? How could you Machzir Le Scoop and then put it back in the threshold, Oil Chalon Shal Gabe a Pesach or on the windowsill? How could you do that? Then you'd be metaltal from the karmas of Shus Yachid. So what is the case over here? Omer Abaya, La'olam De'ein Bay Arba, we're talking where the lock is not Dalet al Dalet. It's not Arba. So therefore we understand why the Rabbanan say that it's Mutter. Why does Rameir say it's also? But we're talking V'yesh Boy Kedei Lachai Kulashlim L'Dalet, that the door is thick enough to say that if you would carve it out, so if you would view this, and it's not Dalet al Dalet, it's less than Dalet, but there's a thickness over here in the wall that theoretically this could be carved out, and then there would be, if you combine the thickness of the lock and the wall, it would be Dalet al Dalet. So theoretically it could become Dalet al Dalet. And it's based on the long-standing machlokes over here between Rameir and Chachamim. The Rameir say if you have a thickness of an area, have a mass that theoretically could be carved out and become, therefore, you could carve out this area and the area in question becomes bigger and wider, then we view it as being carved out. And therefore, we would view this lock, even though it's not Dalet al Dalet, we would view it as Dalet al Dalet and view it as, therefore, Rishus HaYachid, and therefore you can't transfer from the threshold to the lock because it's a karmos of Rishus HaYachid. Rabbanan Savra Ein Chaykim L'Hashlam, and Rabbanan apply the principle that they apply all over, that we don't say Chaykim L'Hashlam, we don't view it as it's being carved out, and therefore it's considered a Mokum Petur. We learn out from this brisa three things. We see over here that we say chaykikim lahashlim. So therefore we see from here, from Rameir, that we say chaykikim lahashlim. And we also see the Rameir, he was chayzer, he retracted from what he said, that we are geyser in a case of sharagina by a karmelis, that if he's in one rishus, and of course he can't transfer from a karmelis to a rishus yachid, but that if he's in a rishus yachid, if the key rather is in Rishus Yachid and he's standing in a karmelis, initially we thought that Rameir was geyser, and Rameir was geyser that you can't stand in this Rishus and lock or unlock in the Rishus Yachid, even if you put the key on the lock, even if you're leaving the key in the Rishus Yachid, Aksara, you might transfer it to the place that you're standing, to the karmelis, and now we see that he's geyser, and no, it's only if you're in Rishus Harab and Rishus Yachid that we're geyser, that if you unlock or lock in the one rishus, you might bring the key to where you're standing, but not if it's a karmelis. We see from the Rabbanan that Rav Dimi is correct. If you have a Mokum Petur, it's not Dalet al Dalet, so it's a Mokum Petur. If you have a Mokum Petur, it's between a Rishus Harab and a Rishus HaYachid. So you have the Rishus Harab and Rishus HaYachid, and you have a Mokum Petur over here. Each side can put their loads on. The Rishus Harab can put their bundles here. The Rishus HaYachid can put, as long as you don't transfer it from here to here, which it gives the appearance of doing a achnas or a saw, as long as you're not transferring. But if you put it here and take it off, put it here and take it off, or leave it here, that you can do, as long as you do not end up transferring from one rishus to the other. Mutal v'nei rishus haram v'nei rishus hayachid l'kasav alav, to adjust their loads, but ubelvat shelo yachlifu, as long as they don't transfer it, end up transferring it from one rishus to the other rishus. Continuing on with the discussion about closing openings, is it considered baina or not? Zok the Mishnah, if you have a bolt that has a knob on the end. Now, if you have a bolt, it could be considered to be as boina. It could be construed as boina because If you have a door, in those days they used to take a bolt and insert it into a hole in the threshold, and that kept the door from opening. That could be viewed and construed as being boina. However, if it has a knob on the end, the knob can be used as a pestle, can crush spices, crush items, and is a kli, is usable as a kli. And a kli is not something that a person normally would put into and use as construction because he won't be able to use it as a kli anymore. So the issue is this: if the bolt has a knob and it's usable as a kli, is it now mutter to insert into the hole or not? Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yasi Matir. Rabbi Eliezer is also Yasi Mutter. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, he said there's a Maisa B'Knesset B'Tveria in the Shul Tveria Shayu Nogi by Heter. Initially they were Nogi by Heter until Achabol Rabbi Gamliel was a Cain of Alshalim. Until Rabbi Gamliel came, as Cain came, and they said it's also. So you see the Maisa that it's also. Rabbi Yasi says no, that's not the way the Maisa was. Isser no boy. Initially they were Nogi and Isser. Until Rabbi Gamliel Zakain came and said it's mutter. So you see that Lamaisa is mutter. If the bolt it's tied with a cord, and the cord is so secure and strong that if you pick up the cord, and you can raise the bolt as well. So it's strong, tied in a very strong, secure way. Then everyone agrees that it's mutter. Everyone is mutter because it does not have the appearance of building because it's tied in a secured way, and it's a negotiation. It has a bolt, it has a knob at the end, it has a glusser. Then everyone agrees that it's mutter. When it's not that secure, the cord is weak, and therefore if you pick up the cord, you will not be able to pick up the bolt. Demar Sava Rav Yasi holds cave in the Yesh Barisha Galusra. He says, nevertheless, since there's a knob at the end of the bolt, or as Kli Alav, it has a din of a Kli, and a Kli is not used normally for construction, and therefore it does not have the appearance of building. Omar Sava and Rav Eliezer holds cave in the Nitl Big Dailoi. Says it can't be picked up by the cord. It has the appearance of still being construction material and not a Kli, and therefore it's also.